Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And today I'm talking about my first experience listening to a full Led Zeppelin album, and I started right at the beginning. I don't know if I'm going to go on to listen to the whole Led Zeppelin discography. I should probably say up front, this isn't really my kind of music. I feel like if I don't get that disclaimer, I risk being piled on by diehard Led Zeppelin fans. But that would be a shame because the whole reason I decided to check this one out was to try and give another chance to a style of rock and roll music that I hadn't given much consideration to in the past. A couple of years ago when I first moved into my building, I met this man, probably in his 70s, and he was wearing a mask with a Led Zeppelin album cover on it. And I asked him what it was, and he told me, and he was like, "Oh, they must be too old for you." And I felt really bad because I wanted to say, no, they're not too old for me. I love tons of music from the 60s and 70s. It's just Led Zeppelin rocks a bit too hard for me. I actually mentioned in an older video how I view Led Zeppelin as the band that reinvented rock and roll. Nowadays, when someone says rock and roll or there's a film portrayal of a rock and roll band, they don't tend to look like Elvis Presley or the Beatles, not that sort of three chords, little bit of electric guitar, fun, accessible music. Instead, it's sort of wild, extremely loud guitar solos and drum solos, screamy vocals. This rock and roll is now understood as hard rock. And Led Zeppelin are one of the first, if not the first band to embody that sound. Now, as someone who, when I say I like rock and roll, I'm talking more 1950s and 1960s, earlier British invasion stuff. That can be a bit frustrating for me sometimes. But again, Led Zeppelin are such a huge part of rock and roll history. If you talk to people who consider themselves rock fans, inevitably a lot of them are going to like Led Zeppelin. Rick Beato talks a lot about what great musicianship they had. I decided to give this record a chance. So here's my reaction to it, track by track. The first track on this album is Good Times, Bad Times, and I really like this one. The song starts with a heavy, it's an almost metal sounding guitar bit, but then the percussion comes in, and I think I hear a cowbell. This combination of kind of goofy light music with heavy, intense rock creates a kind of three-dimensional feel. Meanwhile, the vocals themselves have a number of different feels going on. At times, there's kind of choral singing. At times, there are parts where Robert Plant's voice sounds more like the early Who, kind of modest, a bit on the high side, but not too high. And other times, he gets trippier and psychedelic, like David Bowie or like Jefferson Airplane. Lyric wise, for a moment, this song seems quite interesting. It opens with the line, "In the days of my youth, I was told what it means to be a man." This leads one to think this will be quite an introspective, potentially philosophical song. I don't know if it quite goes there, but it's trying to make some kind of point, I guess, about associating masculinity with one's ability to stay in a relationship. Track number two is called Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. So this one starts with finger-picked acoustic guitar before it gets heavy. And that's one of the things I respected about Zeppelin in this experience, that they didn't just have one sound. Sure, they were defined by hard rock, but they weren't just hard rock. They were also interested in acoustic music and folk music. And this song was originally written by a folk singer named Anne Breeden. And Zeppelin took an interest in it when I think Jimmy Page saw Joan Baez playing it in concert. So very much influenced by folk music. Now, to be honest, I don't know what inspired them about this song in particular. Its lyrics are weirdly minimal, especially for a song that seems like it's so dramatic and how it's performed. So I don't know if they were drawn in by a kind of disorienting, so not bad necessarily, but minimal and ordinary that it ends up being good and interesting kind of vibe. I don't know. Track number three is called You Shook Me. So this was originally a song recorded by Muddy Waters and written by J.B. Lenoir and blues songwriting legend Willie Dixon. But Zeppelin takes this blues song and gives it kind of a stoner aesthetic. Now, the problem with listening to this song now is it's hard to say, does the music objectively have a stoner sound, or is it we just have come to associate late 60s music with stoner culture? But regardless, it creates a different sound than the original blues stuff. when you just hear sort of low budget recordings of someone playing an acoustic or even electric guitar and wailing in that mournful blues way, it just has a sort of pain of life feel to it. Whereas this one doesn't have that kind of direct pain, but rather it has the feel of someone who's kind of out of it and thus is kind of creating a pain for themselves, but is also kind of in a blissful, relaxed kind of state. This song ends with a bizarre little seagull cry. It's a really cool thing that Robert Plant can do with his voice. Now, when I'm listening to this song, I'm not sure I appreciate it as a song. It doesn't have that flow I like as a melody, but undoubtedly it's a very interesting performance, something I'd like to have in the background. Track number 4, Dazed and Confused, comes next. This is based on a psychedelic folk song by a guy named Jake Holmes. And it feels kind of musically similar to the Jake Holmes version, though for some reason it has different lyrics. The lyrics, kind of like the other songs on the album, are about a romantically disenchanted blues singer. Holmes's version had a vaguer psychedelic feel to it. There's a kind of weird thing where track 3 flows perfectly into track 4, so it ends up sounding like an overlong jam song. But I feel like if you take the time to appreciate that these are two different songs, you might enjoy them a bit more. Track number 5 I really liked. This one is called Your Time Is Gonna Come. It opens with an organ, so once again bringing a new sound into the record, and there's a lot of choral singing onto it, so it has that sort of twisted hippie vibe to it. Lyric wise, again, not the most interesting song. It's an angry relationship post mortem. Though I suppose you could say the lyric, made up my mind to break you this time, won't be so fine, it's my turn to cry. You can make the case that's a kind of interesting lyric, as it suggests a view of changing power dynamics that's more nuanced than just, I'm going to be angry now. Rather, it's, I'm going to be sad and vulnerable now, and in a way, that's my revenge. We then get a song called Black Mountain Side. This is another hippie-ish sounding one, thanks to the hand drums that are in there, but it's just Jimmy Page soloing on an acoustic guitar for the most part. Track number 7 is called Communication Breakdown. This one is more of a rocker with a clean but thick sound. It's not a standout, but it's nice. It has enough of a different feel that it keeps the record interesting. Track number 8 is called I Can't Quit You Baby. This is the second Willie Dixon composition on the record. This one was first recorded by a singer named Otis Rush. Unlike the early stuff on here, this one just feels like a blues song. It's not really Zeppelin trying to put their own new genre kind of spin to it. And then the album ends with a long blues number called How Many More Times. There's some distinctness in the guitar sound. My first thought was that it had a whammy bar on it, but then I was reading that Jimmy Page used a bowed guitar on this album, so that's probably what's producing the interesting sound here. So for the most part, this is a record that I can enjoy in the background. It creates a nice 60s vibe, but it feels like Zeppelin is better at finding cool little riffs and bringing in different sounds, but not necessarily tying in nice songs together, at least at this moment. That said, Good Times, Bad Times was a really nice surprise. It felt like a transition between earlier British invasion stuff and the hard rock sound of Zeppelin. And musically, at least, I thought Your Time Is Gonna Come was a pretty fun song to listen to. So let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments below. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.